Hey guys, you're welcome back to my channel today. Thank you so much for stopping by. In this video, we'll be drafting this Victorian corset dress. So if you're interested, keep on watching and let's get started. I already went ahead to mark out my point. The distance from my shoulder to my chest line is 8 inches. Distance from my shoulder to my bust point is 10 inches. Distance from my shoulder to my under bust point is 13 inches. Distance from my shoulder to my waist point, which is my half length, is 16 inches. And I added 1 inch for stitching allowance, so I marked out 17 inches. After doing that, I went ahead to rule straight lines across all these points. On my shoulder line, which is the start of this pattern paper, I went ahead to take half of my shoulder measurement. I indicated that with a dot. On the dot, I went down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope and I slanted it to the neckline area. After doing that, on my chest line, I'm going to place the same measurement that I have on my shoulder line, which is 8 inches. I'll indicate that with a point, and then I'll use my ruler to connect from the point on the shoulder line to meet the point on the chest line. I'll connect both points into a straight line. After doing that, I'm going to mark my neckline measurement, and I'll be using the standard measurements. I'll take 3 inches for the width and 3 inches for the depth. After doing that, I'll connect with my ruler like this. The next thing I'll do is to mark this straight line that I have right here, and I'll mark the middle point. What I have is 7 inches. Half of 7 inches is 3.5 inches. I indicated that with a dot. On that dot, I'll go inward by half an inch, and I'll also indicate that point. What I'll do is to place my tape on the chest line, and I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. I'll also indicate that with a dot. After doing that, I'm going to use my ruler to connect from the shoulder slope to meet the half an inch, and from there to meet the point on the chest line, just like you see me doing. After doing that, guys, next thing I'm going to do is to take my bust pan measurement, which is half of my nipple to nipple measurement. Mine is 4 inches, so I'm going to place 4 inches on the chest line, on the bust point, on the under bust point, and on the waist point. I'll indicate the 4 inches with a dot. After doing that, I'll connect all the dots into a straight line. After doing that, next now I'll just take in my dart. So for the dart, I'll be taking 1 inch on the center front, and I'll take 1 inch on the side front. I'm doing that on the waist, and on the under bust also, I'll go out by 1 inch on the center front and 1 inch on the side front. After doing that, I'll connect both points into a straight line. So guys, next thing I'll do is to go down on the bust point. On the bust line, I'll go down by 1 inch, and I'll indicate the 1 inch with a dot. After doing that, I'm going to place my ruler, and I'll connect from the 1 inch dot to meet the line on the under bust line. So this line is not supposed to be straight, and it's not supposed to be too curvy, so just use your free hand if you don't have your ruler. After doing that, what I'm going to do is to determine where I want my yoke to start from. So on the chest line, I went up by 1.5 inches. You can do 1 inch or half an inch depending on what you want. So I'll mark the 1.5 inch upward, and I'll rule a straight line across. So this is going to serve as my new chest line. After doing that, guys, I'm going to extend my dart leg to meet this 1.5 inches. So I'll place my ruler like so, and I will extend this straight line that I already have here. After doing that, guys, the next thing I'm going to do is to tighten my over bust to avoid gaping. So what I'll do is to take half an inch on both sides of this straight line. So on the center front, I'll mark half an inch. On the side front, I'll mark half an inch. After doing that, I'm going to use my ruler to connect from the half an inch mark to meet the bust point. So just look at what I am doing. I'll just place my ruler like this, and I'll connect like this. Okay, after doing that, guys, I'll use my marker to trace it out so it will be visible. So guys, next thing I'll do is to measure the shoulder line, and whatever I have, I'm going to divide it on equally. So what I have is 5 inches. on the side front I'll take 3 inches, on the center front I'll take 2 inches. Okay, so whatever you have, divide it unequally. If you have 4.5 inches, take 2.5 inches and 2 inches. But I have 5 inches, so I'm going to take 2 inches on the other side, and on this end I'll take 3 inches. Okay, I hope you understand. After doing that, guys, I'm going to place my tape on this dart leg, and I'll go out by 1.5 inches. So just go out by 1 inch. I did 1.5 inches, and then I changed my mind, so I came inward by 1 inch instead of the 1.5 inches that I took earlier. I came in by 1 inch. So I'm going to connect from the dot on the shoulder line to meet the 1 inch mark that I just made. So I'll connect into a straight line like this. After doing that, I'll use my free hand to blend like this into the armhole area. So just look at what I'm doing. I used my free hand to blend everything into the armhole area, and I'm going to straighten this other part. Okay, so the upper part is going to be the yoke. I'll also outline the armhole area. That is the part we are going to cut. I'll outline it using my marker. The next thing I'll do is to start placing my measurements. So on the chest line, I already have my bust circumference divided by 4. What I'll do is replace the dart. Okay, after doing that, I'll add my stitching allowance. I'll head over to the under bust. On the under bust, I'll place my under bust circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart also, and I'll add my stitching allowance. On the waistline, I'll place my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart, and I'll also add my stitching allowance. After doing that, I'll connect all the dots together. So the next thing I'll do is to blend my armhole area like this. Okay, so after doing that, guys, you know this is a Victorian corset, so I'm going to be creating star lines. Okay, create the lines wherever you want to create it. What I'll do is to go out on the under bust point. I'll go out from this dart leg. I'll go out by 2 inches. Okay, I'll indicate that with a point. I'll repeat the same thing on the waistline. I'll go out from the dart leg by 2 inches. After doing that, I'll connect these 2 dots into a straight line. I'll connect it to meet the chest line, just like this. And I want to snatch my waist by 1 inch. So I want to remove 1 inches from the waist line. So what I'll do is to go out by 1/2 inch on the left, and I'll go out by 1/2 inch on the right. After doing that, I'll use my ruler to create the dart. Okay, so just look at what I'm doing. I'll connect like this. That way I've taken 1 inch from the waist area. I hope that you understand. I'm trying to make this as easy as possible. I'll use my marker to also outline this dart leg so we know where to cut when we are cutting. I want to create another style line on the center front. So what I'll do is to divide what I have on the waistline, as you can see me doing, on the under bust line and on the waistline. I'll divide whatever I have by 2, and I'll connect into a straight line. Okay, but I'm not going to take any dart there. I'll just leave that part, and I'll label center front 1, center front 2, side front 1, side front 2. I'll also go ahead and shade the dart so we know where we are cutting. So just look carefully, look at where I'm cutting so you know where to cut. Okay. After cutting, guys, this is what I have. Okay, so I'll go ahead and draft out the back. So for the back, I've already gone ahead to mark out my lines. Distance from my shoulder to my chest line is 8 inches. Distance from my shoulder to my bust point is 10 inches. Distance from my shoulder to my under bust point is 13 inches. My waistline, which is my half length, is 16 inches, and I added 1 inch, okay, for stitching allowance on the base. So what I have on this pattern paper is 17 inches. On the shoulder line, I went ahead to take half of my shoulder measurements. I indicated that with a dot. On the chest line, I'll take the 8 inches and I'll connect the 2 dots into a straight line. On the straight line, I'll go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and I'll slant from that point into the neckline area like this. After doing that, guys, I'm going to determine the neckline. So for the depth, I'll be taking 2 inches, and for the width, I'll be taking 3 inches. Okay, After doing that, I'm going to connect the neckline together like this. The next thing I'll do is to place my bust span measurement, which is half of my nipple to nipple measurement. Mine is 4 inches. I'll place the 4 inches on the chest line, on the bust point, on the under bust point, and on the waist point. I'll go ahead and connect all these points into a straight line. After doing that, guys, I'll go ahead and take my dart. So I'll be taking half an inch on both sides of this straight line. So I'll place my tape like this and I'll mark half an inch. On the other end also, I'll place my tape and I'll mark half an inch. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is to go down from my chest line by 1 inch, and I'll indicate that with a dot. After doing that, I'll use my ruler to connect from the waistline to meet the 1 inch dot that I have below the chest line like this. After doing that, guys, I'm going to place my tape on this straight line, and whatever I have, I'll divide it into 2 equal halves. What I have was 7 inches. Half of 7 inches is 3.5 inches. On the chest line, I'll place my bust circumference divided by 4. I'll indicate that with a dot. After doing that, I'll use my ruler to connect from the middle point to meet the point that I have on the chest line. The next thing I'll do is to start placing my measurements. On my chest line, I already have my bust circumference divided by 4. On the other bust line, I'll take my under bust circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart and I'll add my stitching allowance. On the waist point, I'll take my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart and I'll add my stitching allowance. On the bust, I'll also go ahead. On the chest line, I'll go ahead and add my stitching allowance. After doing that, I'll connect all these dots together and I'll blend out my armhole. The next thing I'll do is to go down from the neckline by 1 inch, and then I'll indicate that with a dot. So the back of this dress is open and it also has a loop. I'll be using loop for mine. You can use eyelets for yours. So I'm trying to create that opening on the back. So I'll just connect from that 1 inch to meet this dart leg. That is how opened I want the back to be. So the next thing I'll do is to create where I'm going to place my loop. So from the center back, I went in by 2 inches, and on the waistline, I went in by 1 inches. So this is like a V back. Okay, so when you're lacing your loop and you're getting to the down, it will be closing. So I'll go ahead and shade out this part because we are going to cut it out. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to also divide this back. So I'll place my tape from that dart leg and I'll divide what I have, and I'm going to mark the middle point. So I'll mark it on the under bust line and I'll also mark it on the waistline. After doing that, I'm going to connect into a straight line just like you see me doing. So I'll label center back 1, center back 2, and side back 1, and I'll go ahead and cut. So pay close attention so you know where to cut. So guys, after cutting, this is what I have. For the skirt part, I already went ahead to fold my fabric into 4, and I left my zipper allowance of 1 inch at the back. Okay, so I have 1 folded edge and 2 open edge on the end of this fabric. Okay, so to know the length of your dress, you are going to take out your half length. So my half length was 16 inches. I'm going to place my tape like this. I'll take out 16 inches and I'm going to mark the full length of my dress. So the full length of my dress is 42 inches. My dress is 40 inches. I'm going to fold it on the base with the 2 extra inches. So the next thing I'll do is to mark the distance from my waist to my hip, which is 8 inches. I'll indicate that and I'll rule a straight line across. So this is my hip line and that is my waistline. On the waistline, I'm going to place my waist circumference divided by 4. I indicate that with a dot. After doing that, I'll add 2 inches for my allowance. So this fabric is stretchy. I don't need to take any darts. And on the hip line, so look at the way I'm placing my measurements. I'm placing it backwards. On the hip line, I'll take my hip circumference divided by 4 and I'll add 2 inches for my stitching allowance. I'm adding 2 inches because I want enough allowance inside this skirt because it's not for me. So on the base I'm going to place the hip circumference divided by 4. I'm not going to add any stitching allowance at all. So after doing that, I'll go ahead and connect. So while connecting from the waist to the hip, I forgot to connect to my allowance. I later realized that I didn't connect to the allowance, but it was a little bit too late. But like I said, this fabric is stretchy, so I don't need to panic. The next thing I'll do is to go ahead and cut. When I realized, I tried to connect everything, but my skirt had this sharp edge on the side, so I'm just going to adjust it when I'm sewing. So after cutting, guys, this is what I have. So for the back we have 2 pieces, and for the front we have 1 piece. So because this fabric is stretchy, that is why I did not add that to it. So you can go ahead and add that to yours. And lining, if you're using any type of fabric that is not stretchy, you can also line it if you want to. For the front, I went ahead to fold the front into 2, and on the center I went down by 1 inch. I'm going to slant like this. This is to enable the skirt part to sit well on my waist. So I'll go ahead and trace it out, and that is all for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Please don't forget to like this video. Stay tuned for the sewing version of this tutorial. Subscribe if you have not. I'll see you in the next one.